concrete, and it is indeed as much through acts in terms of financing decisions that support Ukraine, in terms of support for refugees, in terms of unprecedented decisions when it comes to financing the delivery of military equipment, lethal and non-lethal, to Ukraine, that we're expressing our solidarity to the country. And I can assure you that this solidarity is very well understood by the Ukrainian authorities. This, of course, has absolutely, well, this, of course, how can I phrase this, does not in any way diminish or color the visit by the three PMs, which was indeed a very great sign of solidarity on their part. Solidarity is expressed in different ways through different channels. Are there other questions for us today? Yes, please.
Khalid Hamid Faruqi from Geo Television News. I just came back after 21 days in Ukraine. And I just, for my clarity, that is, which is the immediate protections for refugees. These refugees only for Ukrainian refugees, or also people who were student or temporary resident there in Ukraine or on work contract, they are also crossing border from Poland and Romania. Will this bill protect also non-Ukrainian citizens who are coming from Ukraine, or they will only have to stay 15 days and they leave, like many government contract with Polish authorities? And I have witnessed myself, because I traveled 4 days in Kharkiv to Krakow in train, and also on the Warsaw Central Station, Krakow Central Station, there are hardly any help for non-Ukrainian refugees. Polish are not providing them. So there is an NGO which set up another separate stall and very big written on that, for non-Ukrainian refugees. So is there any mechanism to really prevent this sort of discrimination? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalid. First thing I would like to say is that we are glad to see you safely back in our press room after your stay in a war zone. Of course, support for refugees wherever they are from is paramount for the European Union. I will let Anita give you some details on what the Temporary Protection Directive does. Of course, the way in which citizens are welcomed and then accommodated depends somewhat on their status, but we can clearly say that the protection offered by the Temporary Protection Directive is not only for Ukrainian citizens. Anita.
Thank you so much for the question. Indeed, as you know, we had an unanimous agreement, so this is something quite historic that the EU, the member states, have agreed on 4th of March to trigger the Temporary Protection Directive. For your information, we're also working on guidelines to member states to help them implement the Temporary Protection Directive. And, of course, as regards also your question, everyone, regardless of their nationality, skin color, or ethnicity, fleeing the war must be granted access to the EU. Now, on those eligible for temporary protection, you have a coverage both for the Ukrainian nationals, but also for everybody who has made Ukraine their home, who have a permanent status. They are covered by this. If you're a student, for your question, if you're on a short stay visa and you're fleeing war in Ukraine, of course you should be able and you are granted access to the EU territory. And then it depends if you can go safely back to your country or if you apply for asylum, and then this case needs to be treated individually. But generally, everybody fleeing war, they will receive access to the EU, and the Commission is also helping third country nationals, everybody in need, also to have the necessary support.
And this includes, for those who were on a short stay, for example, tourists who were in Ukraine, or students, etc. This includes cooperation with their country of origin in order to help organize repatriation to the country. And there have been numerous flights which have been organized very often by the countries themselves, sometimes by the European Union with the help of Frontex, in order to repatriate people who found themselves stranded because of the conflict and needed to go home. Right. Any other questions for us today? Yes, please.
Anne Damiani for Agence Europe. Do you have more details about the Central Securities Depositories? You said a press release is going to be sent, but can we have a bit more information right now, or?
Let me just check whether there are other questions on the Ukraine file, if I can call it that way, and then we will come to your question. Lukasz, I suppose your question is not on the Central Securities Depositories review, but on Ukraine. So go ahead.
Yes, hi, Łukasz Osiński from Polish Press Agency. It's not about that issue. The French Ministry of Defense confirmed on Tuesday reports by the disclosed investigative portal about the arms sales to Russia. Following the introduction in 2014 embargo by the European Union. So, however, according to the ministry, these activities were completely legal. So I would like to know whether the Commission is examining this matter. Did you ask France for any clarification? Thank you.
Nabila, please.
Unfortunately, I'm not really aware of what you were saying, so if you can either repeat it or I will get back to you. So first maybe repeat your question and then I will check.
So the issue is that there have been articles in the French media on the fact that French arm exports to Russia continued up until 2020, despite the despite the sanctions against Russia as of 2014. And the French have said that this is entirely legal. The sanctions have been applied, but the sanctions foresaw as well that certain contracts which foresaw deliveries could come to an end. Lukasz's question is whether we are examining these claims to the French authorities and whether we agree with them.
Well, I mean, EU arms embargo contains the following exemptions, which is contracts concluded before the 1st of August 2014 and ancillary contracts necessary for the execution of such contracts. So that's what I can say at this point, nothing more.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no further questions on these topics, so we come back to the question on the review of the Central Securities Depositories. Dan, if you want to come and give a bit more detail on this.
And thank you for your question. I don't know who asked. There you are. Thanks very much for your question. So first of all, just to start out, we have a press release and a memo available online, also available in French and German, if I'm not mistaken. And you'll also find there the links to the legal texts, the impact assessments, and all the various other legal texts that you might find interesting. So that's just by way of starting that out. So first of all, why are we reviewing this, and what is the Central Securities Depositories Regulation, which is indeed a bit of a mouthful? So, as Eric said at the very beginning of the press conference today, what we are doing is proposing simpler rules so that settlement markets in the EU are more efficient and they're safer, and that ultimately it can contribute to the Capital Markets Union in the European Union. Okay? Why do we want to do that? We want to ensure that we can get the proper financing within the Capital Markets Union directly to companies and also, for example, small and medium-sized companies. Why is this important? Okay? Central securities depositories play a quite important role in our financial markets. Why? Because they are the bodies, they operate the infrastructure in the settlement of transactions. So, for example, if you buy shares from me, you give me I give you the shares, and in exchange, you give me cash. The Central Securities Depositories operate in between us two to settle that transaction. What happens sometimes is that it can take up to 2 days, 2 working days, for that transaction to go through. And you can imagine that in the financial markets, there's lots and lots of money involved in this. For example, in 2019, the transactions settled by these Central Securities Depositories amounted to 1,120 trillion euro, which is in American English, I believe, 1.1 quadrillion euro. So that's quite a lot of money. And during that period, obviously, there can be risks involved. So what we're trying to do here is to review the regulation that has been in place, by the way, since 2014, after the financial crisis, to make these markets more efficient, safer, and ultimately can contribute to the Capital Markets Union. So that's it in a nutshell.
Fascinating subject, systemic in nature, and I wish you lots of fun reading the document. Any other questions for us today? Mose.
Yes, thanks again to ask a few questions. Of course, I'm leaving soon. Well, it's a question for Dan, in fact. It's about, I saw you published a press release yesterday about the latest, let's say, conference panel of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And it's very interesting because now we can read about the recommendations we've been adopted by those panels. I would like to ask, what is the process ahead? I mean, will all the recommendations we've been adopted be, let's say, discussed or approved at some final plenary? And when is in that case? And also notice that if you read these recommendations, some of them are, in fact, dealing with treaty changes, I suppose, and other, I can imagine that the Commission will have some opinions whether it already is done by the Commission in different ways and so on. I wonder if the Commission itself will somehow comment and assess, those recommendations, or will that be done, let's say, by the special organization set up for the conference? Thank you.
Thanks, Mose. I think there's a number of different angles to your question there, but let me try and answer them one by one. So, indeed, you're right. The conference is in full swing. You know that we've had a process that's been ongoing now for a long time. We've also had the European citizens panels in a number of different European cities. We have now recommendations coming forward from the citizens who were selected and who participate in the conference. And as you rightfully point out, we now have a series of plenary sessions where these will be further debated. We had a plenary session in Strasbourg last week. We will have another plenary session later in March, next weekend actually, and 2 further plenary sessions in April, all the while to discuss all of the recommendations involved. Now, obviously, at this point in time, we here in the Commission are not going to comment on the individual recommendations. This is for the citizens to discuss. This is for the process to take forward. As we said from the very, very beginning of the Conference on the Future of Europe, everything is on the table. But I don't think it is wise, or you should expect us now, to be commenting on the different parts of the conference until the end of that process.
Matthijs.
Yeah, now we have come to my favorite topic, the Conference on the Future of Europe. Not about the recommendations, but Mr. Verhofstadt and I think Mr. Weber as well, they have said recently that they now going to call for a convention. They think this is the right step after the conference, and they said we're going to discuss this with the Commission. So has this discussion already taken place, and what is the position of the Commission? Thanks.
Sorry, Majesty, I didn't catch the word. You said convention. Was that convention? Okay. No problem. First of all, I'm not aware of specific conversations around this. I can certainly check. I mean, we're in constant contact with a lot of people in the Parliament and the Council, so I'm sure conversations have happened, but I'm not specifically aware of anything. Look, I'm not going to now speculate about what might happen after the end of the process. You know that we have kicked this off. We have as our ultimate goal within this phase of the conference to come forward with a series of recommendations that will then be delivered to the institutions, to the three institutions, the Parliament, the Council and the European Commission, and then we will take it forward from there. But today I don't have anything specific to comment on as regards next steps.
Okay, thank you very much. This will bring us to the end of today's midday briefing. See you tomorrow.